Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes. First off, I want to thank Fabio, Mike, and our teams for putting together an amazing conference. Yeah, this has been a great conference. Okay, I'm going to do something different tonight. I was recently over, well, not, I guess it's been a while now, over 2022 and 2023, I was given a series of briefings, and I was told that this is what David Grush and elements of the DoD are giving to senators and select media. So I was given this outline, it was approved, and um, the people that gave me the briefing wanted me to deliver it exactly how I received it, not to infuse it with my beliefs. Um, so we're going to do a little mental exercise today. Um, I felt a lot of chaotic energies um, over the last hour. So everyone can close their eyes. We're going to do a little mental exercise. Okay. I need everyone to picture themselves standing outside. The sun is bright and the light is all around you. You're going to take 3 breaths, and with each breath, you're going to breathe in the light, and you're going to exhale any chaos or distracting energies. 1, 2, 3. With your eyes still closed, you now find yourself standing in front of a government building. You're not you. You're a representative of the people. You're going to walk through the door. You know you're going to a skiff room where you're going to get a briefing. They ask for your phone. As you hand them the phone, you're letting go of all the knowledge you think you have on the subject. As you hand them your keys, you hand them your truth. As you walk through the metal detector, there is no bias. You walk through the doors and you're in a room. A person comes in a uniform holding a folder. You're about to receive a briefing about non-human intelligence. It's been in the media. There've been hearings already. But now it's time to get a briefing and find out what's really going on, what the government knows. And in this new mindset, you can open your eyes and prepare for this briefing. I wanted us to get into a different state of mind, into a different state of ego, if you will. Because this briefing, everyone I've shared elements of it with have had different reactions, and most of them have been upsetting because some of this information is going to be a little dark. But at the end, we will see that we hold the power. Humanity is in a predicament, but we do hold the power to change it. I received this briefing by phone twice. once in 2022, and then I can't remember the month. And then in 2023 in August, late August. And I was told that I was going to be able to share this information at some point to kind of sit on it, which I have. Some of this information will be a little familiar. Chris and David spoke about it last night. You'll hear a little bit different spin, but like I said, okay, you want me to take both? All right, can you hear me? Okay. Let's see, where was I? Where was I? Oh, okay. So the information is going to be similar, but this is not infused with information I've received from other insiders. It's not information. I'm trying not to put it through my filter and through my distortions and trying to deliver it as it was given to me. I don't agree with everything in it. There's a lot I do and a lot that I've learned to agree with, but I don't agree with everything. I just promise to deliver the information, so please receive it in that energy. Okay, so as a planet, we are dealing with layers of anomaly. We're dealing with, indeed, extraterrestrial beings. Now, aliens, actual extraterrestrials that as we would think of them, live in the same third dimension as we do. And as I've described in the past, time is a local phenomenon. It has to do with the gravity is the engine of time. So whatever density of a star you happen to be rotating around, that star system has its own time space, for lack of a better term. So time is occurring differently and being experienced differently in each star system. So, and to some degree, even ETs who are in our third dimension, in our plane, they're also somewhat in their own dimension, as we are with time. And on my notes, when I was getting this briefing, I couldn't tell if it was a 3 or a 5 in my notes. So what is being told to senators and media is that there are only really 3 to 5 ET groups visiting the Earth, and they don't really care about humanity as much as our egos would think that they do. They're really more interested in our ecosystem, what we're doing to it, and they're studying us in general. We've had, you know, and the ETs have been monitoring our human evolution and taking part in it at times. But they have warned, and we've heard about in the 50s, the government being warned that we were interacting with a very negative group. And we chose to keep doing so because it was giving us knowledge and technology. The positive groups would not. So that is basically a very limited amount of information that was given on actual extraterrestrials. And then things in the briefing move over to adjacent dimensions. We have dimensions that there's a technology that uses like 5 different types of radiation to create an image, and DARPA created it decades ago, and it has like ionic radiation, ultraviolet, all of these different radiations are detected and put into like a video picture. And they played with the frequencies at DARPA, and they started seeing these beings, and they started calling it the spirit camera. Well, they played with it more and more and developed the technology, and they could actually see into adjacent dimensions to ours. They put it in satellites and have observed a solar system that looks like ours, except there's subtle differences. I should probably show this slide. So I've had it described that where these ley lines are across the earth, that it creates portals. But then it was described to me more recently that it's an area where dimensions are always in pulsing, they're moving, and sometimes they cross over. And at these points that we call portals, it's where these dimensional planes are crossing over each other, and then they overlap for a period of time, and then they go back. And a lot of people have attributed that to Bigfoot and cryptids and all sorts of other phenomenon. But that's how the so-called portals were described to me more recently. There were humans on some of these, on Earth, these other Earths. There were some adjacent dimensions to where there were more animal-looking bipedal civilizations. And the further they got away from our dimension, the stranger the differences became. So they became aware of some of the human, very similar to us, groups in other dimensions, and they established communication. And I don't know much about that communication, and I don't know what was delivered to senators, but I'm told, obviously I wasn't there, I don't know if this is what the senators heard word for word, but that's what I'm told they were. And then we have the higher dimensions. You've probably heard people talk about just these very bizarre geometric shapes of UFOs, some of them described as chandeliers, some of them that look, they come out and they just branch out in weird directions. Well, they believe it's similar. It's something from a higher dimension coming into ours, and we're unable to sense and perceive it. Just like if we were in a two-dimensional plane, picture yourself on a piece of paper, and if someone takes a pencil and shoves it through the paper, all we're going to see is a disc, and it'll look like maybe it comes and lands, and then maybe just disappears as the pencil goes all the way through. And that's all that we can perceive. They think something similar is happening with the probes that they believe are coming from these higher dimensions. And when these anomalies happened over sensitive locations and bases, they had strange translucent shapes reported by the personnel, light orbs, shadow beings of different sizes, all in these highly restricted facilities. And it seemed to coincide with these strange sightings. And they believe that this is occurring in the fifth dimension and higher, that these beings are probing and studying us. Now we're moving to something else that was touched on last night. The ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. It's one that many of us are unaware of. I had heard a little bit about it, but hadn't really focused on it. I was focusing on other dimensional beings and ETs, of course. The term was coined by John Keel in 1970. He was a paranormal researcher, and he was trying to put all paranormal categories together and try to explain them. He was heavily influenced, and there are some typos in here. I apologize. I didn't have time to change them. Jacques Vallée and other people that were members of Project Blue Book. He was heavily influenced by their research. And like I said, he's trying to explain everything: UFOs, cryptids, angels, demons, ghosts, poltergeists. He thinks he can explain everything by this one hypothesis. Now, this was, and probably still is, highly controversial and rejected by people in the esoteric and UFO research communities because, I mean, the DoD, they were very reluctant to accept a lot of this as well, but it became overwhelming. The evidence was just overwhelming. So, according to Jacques Vallée, there seems to be some sort of presence that's been here since the beginning of time, since before we were here anyway. UFOs are very, it's very, he compares all of the different stories and myths from the past to the current UFO phenomenon and describes the trickster element. And there are some very absurd things reported that cause people to just reject the entire topic. If you, one of the examples is Skinwalker Ranch. There were police that were driving around patrolling, and they saw orbs, UFOs. So they were driving around the ranch to see if what they could see, and then they saw what looked like two men in trench coats up ahead of them in the road, and they had hats on, like the old Dick Tracy kind of, look, like their private investigator look from the 50s. And as they got closer, they could see that both of them were smoking cigarettes. And as they nearly came to a complete stop, they looked, and they were dogmen, bipedal dogmen. So they took off, they freaked out, and then later they're trying to describe to the people at Skinwalker Ranch, and this is back when it was more of the military controlled, not the current owner. And it was just one of these things that's absurd, that always pops up. People see cartoonish looking aliens, just really weird, bizarre things. And it seems to the experience seems to discredit itself in that way. People, I mean, a lot of people that have reported UFOs, who knows how many have kept something back because of the absurdity. So as you can see in the slides, and Jacques Vallée, he'll go into it a little bit deeper, it seems to all, you never see a clear photo or video of UFOs or of Bigfoot or any of these anomalies. It's almost like we're being teased. They're always just outside of observation, our field of observation, to be able to get a really good look. And these things come out of nowhere. They materialize, and a lot of them believe that something is being projected into our reality, and it becomes solid. It becomes manifest. So Jacques Vallée put this theory out, and it was highly rejected. But the absurdity continues. Recently, in Las Vegas, everyone heard about the 10-foot beings in the backyard of a family. Recently, just a couple days ago, the 15-year-old who made the actual 911 call did an interview for the first time. And what he described was they were working on a pickup truck, a bright light like crashed behind them. There was no noise, but they turned around and they saw these two 10-foot tall beings. And he didn't describe them in detail, but he said that they looked very pissed off. They were huffing and they were growling like a dog. So him and his family, they ran in the house, they called 911, they armed themselves, and then these things just disappeared. Well, ever since these things disappeared, they've been having poltergeist activity inside their home. They're seeing shadow beings. The pages in the Bible flip. And then one day they came home and they saw a crucifix hanging upside down in the air, floating, with the Jesus yanked off and thrown across the room. And when they walked closer to it, it fell to the floor. And they ended up, they were Catholic, and they called a priest who came in and cleared their home, and they did all sorts of things to protect their home. So, that adds absurdity to the whole thing. We're talking about aliens, right? Why is he now having what they perceive as demons in their home? So he's no longer describing these things as aliens. Their family believes they're demons. And this is what Chris and David touched on. These beings have been around for many, many thousands of years. They've presented themselves to us differently as our consciousness has evolved. In the very beginning, they were the spirits of the forest, elementals, and we're talking, there are good ones and bad ones, and I kind of superimpose them a little bit here, but you'll see why later. Then they started appearing as the ancient gods as civilization developed. And in the Middle Ages through the late 1800s, there were these weird anomalies in the sky that they called the airships. It was mainly in the 1800s. And it was very bizarre stuff. They looked like dirigibles flying overhead with technology and materials that were known to that time, to the people. When they looked up, they recognized what they were seeing. And weird things like lunchboxes were being dropped from these things, from these dirigibles, and with stories on letters, just absurd stuff. That they are flying around the world in this airship, and they'd made it to 2,500 feet, which back then, a human being that far above sea level was unheard of, let alone flying. So then they started appearing to us as a more technically advanced civilization. I think a lot of us, they started programming humanity for this, for the War of the Worlds incident that happened over the radio. A lot of people freaked out. There's been a number of things to where they were putting this into the consciousness, and people were starting to have contact with ETs. So this thing started to mimic the ETs. The people in the DoD believe that the Greys and the reptilians are projections of this thing, that they didn't evolve, on planets. They don't have a rich history of becoming this super advanced civilization. They were just projected from the imagination of whatever this is. And from what we're told, by other ETs, and this is bringing out a little bit of extra information, is that they know that everything is frequency, you know, um, and our mass consciousness is frequency, and something has infested our mass consciousness, a parasite, a thought form. And I hate to tell you this, it's not outside of us. It's not something you can pull a shield up and a sword to fight. It's in us. It's in our hearts and in our minds. When we have those intrusive thoughts, the temptations, and you succumb to them and you bring this thing into your life, it feeds off of you more and more. And that's the relationship most people have with it. But others interact with it. This being, they say, can control space, time, matter. It can, like I said, manifest. It can freeze time locally. It can slow down time, and can also affect us. It can project thoughts into our heads. It can read our minds because it's in our minds. And it uses our traumas, insecurities against us. It uses our humanity against us. So over time, people who have had meetings or have been abducted by fairies or gnomes or all of these different stories, even encounters with spirits of the forest, often people report missing time, missing for hours or even days. Unexplained pregnancies and miscarriages occur, miraculous healings. People come back with the ability to heal. And they're often come back talking about being taken to other worlds or realms that they interpret through their lens, you know, usually through however we were raised, our religion. Like Chris Bledsoe is someone that is believed to be in contact with the positive side of this force. And the government's been studying him. We'll get to that. But he's a pretty strong Christian, so he interprets everything that he is experiencing through that lens. And you will notice that we all do that. A lot of the people that are just having contact with this being are describing it differently, and it's just because we're using our own experience to try to interpret what's going on. Okay, so I'm kind of skipping around. I apologize. So they can read our thoughts, they can project emotions, they can make you feel intense fear, or they can make you feel intense love to where you're just tears are running down your face. And they can flip that switch either way they want, anytime they want. When we have recovered craft of supposedly some of the craft we've recovered, they appear to have been created on an atomic level, like they were just printed into reality. And they really can't explain how some of these metals and alloys were really created. And like I said, they're sort of printed into our reality. And another thing that's been really strange is that when they've recovered gray aliens, the bodies have not been consistent. And it's not that they're coming from different locations, it's that they're being printed in different ways. And sometimes they're not even complete. And so some of the grays, when they've recovered bodies and done the autopsies, the esophagus or the trachea doesn't terminate to the lungs or the stomach, or what we perceive as a stomach. The organs aren't connected to each other. So it was like it was half-ass printed real quickly, So why would they let us recover something like that? It seems like it's always trying to infuse mystery and confusion into everything. With the Greys, when they recover them alive, I'm told that they usually die within a few days, and they mostly don't communicate. They're just kind of moving around until they stop. What they found out is that these things are manifested into our reality and can only really exist and operate in our reality so long unless they're energetically held here by, unfortunately, human blood products. So they're feeding on our loosh as they exist within us. And when they are printed into our reality, they need the energy or whatever it is in our blood product, in fluids and tissues to stay manifest. And I'm told that some of these grays have been manifest for thousands of years, consuming humans during this whole time period. And I'm told that the reptilians have shown the same qualities of needing to have, that they feed off of both loosh and blood and flesh and all of that stuff. So remember, right now, you're not you. You're a senator sitting back listening to all this. And I think some of you may remember the senators, when they left, were freaked out. Some of the media that this has been shared to have freaked out, like Tucker Carlson, and talking about how he doesn't think this is a physical interaction. He thinks it's spiritual. Well, he's interpreting what he was told through his lens, just as all of us will. So, like I said, there's a positive and negative side of this force, and it's manipulating humanity. It's been one side of it has been very helpful. The other side, as we know, has been very destructive. And throughout time, they have been creating religions and tearing each other's religions down and perverting them. It's like a battle that's been going on between this positive and negative force. They believe the positive force has been bringing us these great teachers and religions to try to act as an antivirus against this infection, this virus that has infected our consciousness. They believe that, the teachings of Jesus and Muhammad and all of these different teachers, the root information and energy from it is here to help us battle this thing. And of course, humans corrupted every religion. That's just what we do because of this force. It influences us. So I have to admit, a lot of this stuff was very hard to swallow, hard to listen to, just because I have my truth, my experiences, and the information I have gleaned is not always the same. But there's something about the information of this dark force that there's something to it. Now, ETs. Now, this is going to be interesting. Extraterrestrial groups and these other adjacent dimensional groups that we've been dealing with have told us that, for thousands of years, they've observed this thing. The positive and negative side of this thing have manifested and fought on the ground, has fought in the air against itself or each other. They don't know if no one really knows what it is. And that the ETs know that it's some form of parasite, energetic thought form parasite, but they just really don't understand. As advanced as the different ETs are, they don't understand what they're dealing with. And they've had a fight against this thing. When they've visited Earth, at different points, they've had warfare with whatever this thing is. And as I said earlier, this thing that it resides within us, within our chakras, it uses our traumas and insecurities, to manipulate us. And it's whatever this force is. It's almost like the Matrix, how the agents would come and take over people. And people who have opened themselves up to darkness, worship the darkness, which there's a lot of people who have chosen to do that, they become like avatars to the darkness. So, like I said, even the ETs have gone up against this thing, and they've learned that it seems concentrated on different areas of the planet where ley lines are, where certain types of rock and geology are. It's almost like this thing energetically installs itself, like it's a capacitor or something. It inhabits certain areas, and of course, it's able to project itself wherever it wants. But that's where it seems to be inhabited. It seems to inhabit just different areas. And there are places that it's really strong, like in South America. You had the Mayans doing blood sacrifices, and they were doing quite a lot of that type of activity, and it really fed this thing. And there are a number of areas in Africa, South America, here in the United States, all around the world where this presence is really strong. But there's also places where the presence is very positive, angelic. Okay, so we're going to get back to abductions and that sort of phenomenon that they think that they can explain. They believe the majority of abduction experiences, not all, are by this force, and that it's abducting us, it's manipulating our light bodies, it's manipulating our genetics, and breeding us and mixing us with other beings. And what they believe this thing is doing is it's trying to stunt our evolution so that we remain a good food source for it. It's just a parasite. It's trying to maintain its food source. They say that they believe this cosmic elemental, for lack of a better word, when it came to Earth, it somehow got trapped here in our electromagnetic field somehow. But it's able to project itself all around the galaxy as solid, um, manifested beings and craft. Okay, and I already talked about the parasitic nature of it. And now this is the part that's got my attention recently. I was told that for decades now, the DoD, NASA, and several American universities, in two briefings, I heard two different numbers and groups of universities involved that are studying UFO prophets and religions that have been popping up. And they're studying it because they're learning how all of the other religions were created, they believe. And the DoD believes that 90% of what our community experiences, whether it's in face-to-face contact, dream work, um, especially channeling, they believe that we're in contact with this force, the positive and the negative one. And these universities have been actually working with Chris Bledsoe and a few others. And I just found out recently that the other day that they had also reached out to James Gilliland, and they've reached out to me. So they're studying how and they're trying to figure out the agenda of why. It seems that the positive force is trying to pull us out of this infection. It's trying to help us. And the other side is trying to keep us a food source. And Diana Pasulka, she's made a lot of waves since 2019 with a couple of books that she's written. And the University of North Carolina, Stanford, one of the universities in Arizona, there are a number of them that are working together. They send students and even military personnel to conferences where they try to blend in with us and hear our stories, hear what we're experiencing, taking notes, and reporting back. They're trying to figure out what's going on with all of the religious aspect of this. And the people who have studied this have run into this hitchhiker effect. The people that went out and investigated Skinwalker Ranch, when they went home, their family were seeing dogmen, orbs, all kinds of poltergeist activity in their homes. And it seemed like they had caught the attention of something that was curious about them and followed them back home. And they were very negative experiences. So they've asked me, and they want to actually study our family. They've been studying Chris Bledsoe's family for quite a while, the whole family. And there's other people that they wanted me to reach out to, that they want to talk to. And they want people to go in and do brain scans, MRIs. They've recently learned that the basal ganglia in the brain of people who are like mediums, people who see ghosts, or in contact with ghosts, people who see UFOs, they all had very dense neurons in that area of the brain, the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia, they're starting to call it the brain within the brain, because that's the area. It's where if you're in a situation to where something dangerous occurs, it immediately pulls from all of your senses and is able to react without you having to think your way through the process. So they believe that these dense neurons are responsible for them being able to actually see and sense other dimensions. And they think that those who are highly intuitive, they don't think it's a supernatural thing. They think it's a physiological thing. And they're starting to study this a lot more. And they're also what they want to do is question certain people while they're having an active MRI scan. And they're able, by asking you certain questions about your experience and watching where the brain activity is, they can tell if you're inventing it or if it's coming from an actual memory. So this is something that they've been developing for a while. Gary Nolan's come out and started to talk about it a little bit. But it's something that I think more people in the community are going to start talking about and hearing about, because I think it's gotten to the point where they've done enough of their quiet studies. There are certain people that they, observed and honed in on that they want to do more of these studies on openly with. So that's going to happen with certain people in this community. And Gary Nolan is recently, he's been leaning in the direction that, this may not, many of these experiences may not be what we think they are. They may not be actual ETs. So the understanding of what this is has changed over time as we've been studying it. In the early days, most of these the people in the Navy, and this is mostly Air Force, they were, right-wing kind of people, Christians. And when they heard this information, I was raised Christian. My grandfather described me as a mystic Christian. He was a preacher. But when I heard this, he was a end times minister, and my programming, my experience, I too immediately thought of certain things from the Bible. Well, apparently that's something that sent shockwaves through in the 50s and 60s, and they didn't want to study it. They were ordering people not to study it. They were afraid that they were going to trigger it into doing something. That's the best way I can describe it. Now, some of the secret societies, especially the ones that are involved with the CIA and some of these Navy secret societies, they started calling these things the architects and the custodians. And they honestly believe that we're in some sort of holographic universe, and maybe even a video game, an interactive video game. And these forces are just the programmers interacting with us, with the program. And they think they fully understand the nature of consciousness now, and they believe it's all a holographic anomaly, a projection. Now, some of the more occult groups, the darker groups, they started doing ceremonies, worshiping it, doing blood rituals, all of that, all of the negative stuff, and they made contact. The reason that these universities and NASA, they're so interested in what's going on in the esoteric community, although they won't admit it publicly, is that they've been able to interact with the negative side of this force. It appears to them as different aliens. It gives them technology, it gives them information, but the positive side will have nothing to do with them, no matter what. They cannot get the positive side to interact with them. So the only way they can learn about it is by studying people who are. And there are people in the esoteric community and without and outside. There are a lot of people like Chris Bledsoe and James Gilliland that have the anomaly of wherever they go, all of these orbs follow them. And they're very interested in those people in particular. And now when I found out James has already been invited to Stanford to do the brain scans and all of that, I wasn't totally surprised. But so they're trying to figure out the positive side of this, and it's just eluding them. I've had all kinds of energetic attacks or weird stuff going on when I've tried to deliver this information within myself, and a lot of the times with the people I deliver the information to. It's upsetting, but that's why I'm trying to deliver it in a way that we're all trying to identify with the senators who are given this information, and not through our own egos and belief systems, because this stuff is pretty upsetting. I questioned the nature of reality after the first one in 2022. My family was kind of scratching their head. I was looking around, like checking the walls, making sure they're really real. I'm like, it really it really sent me into an existential crisis myself. So I think I can understand why Tucker Carlson was pretty freaked out. So on that note, I guess it's really time for us just to take this in as information. This may not be what we think we're experiencing. It may not, and the government could be totally wrong. This is their hypothesis, and they believe that 90% of what we're dealing with is this force, both the positive and the negative, trying to create a new esoteric religion, they believe. The negative side, it's really scary to think that something like this is within all of us, but we do have the power. Focusing outwardly on all of these stories of planetary liberation, beings, negative beings being here or not, battles going on in the Orion Nebula or wherever, that's widely a distraction to get us to focus outside of ourselves. The only way we can lessen the effects of this thing is doing the internal work, dealing with your insecurities that are caused by your traumas, and give it very little to manipulate you with. And of course, it's going to use the people around you who haven't done the inner work, but at least you can isolate yourself from them and the energy. So what we need to do is focus on information that empowers us. We need to focus on, if you were raised Christian, Muslim, or some of these older root religions, we call them, because most people have rebelled against religion. They have. And the word religion triggers a lot of people. But a lot of these teachers brought information to us that helps us overcome this dark force. And there are people who are bringing out information in this community that help with this dark force. But the trickster element that we're dealing with, our ego tries to tell us, my guides will protect me. I can discern. Makes us feel safe and protected from it. But the only way to really protect yourself is to do that inner work. So each of us have the power to defeat this thing one person at a time. So you do have the power, and there's no reason to leave here in fear. I didn't think I was going to have time to get through all this. David told me I wasn't going to have time, but I did it. Barely. But thank you. This was a little uncomfortable for me because, like I said, this is not my information. I haven't done anything like this before. And it was uncomfortable delivering some of the information. It's scary, dark stuff. But when you are healed and when you are balanced, you're not just following your heart everywhere, but you're using your mind as well. You're balanced. People who get caught up, who are fully intellectual, fall into the intellectual traps. People who are fully heart-based fall into the emotional traps. You have to have a balance moving forward of those two things, or you're going to be susceptible to whatever this force is. So thank you for listening to this. This was, like I said, it was much different than what I've presented in the past. There are so many places where I would have infused my information, my experience, but they wanted me to deliver it just like this. So thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, they wanted me to deliver this information exactly the way it was, and they didn't want me to do Q&A on on the topic. They wanted it just to sit there and for you to look at it, pick it up from all directions, consume it, or put it aside, whichever you want to do. But the information is now out there. And I delivered it. They said if I delivered it and I didn't break the rules, there were some other things they were going to let me talk about. I had to remove one slide that I wanted to deliver about the ETs, but that will be in the future, and more information as well. So I think that because I followed the rules reluctantly tonight on this, that I think I'm going to have more information coming forward.